Chapter 7. Diana leaned forward and carefully set her cup on the coffee table. You never told me how she died. She was strangled. Quentin paused and forced himself to go on, holding his voice steady. I found her in what's now the Zen garden, ironically. The little stream there was natural to the area, and we played there quite a bit. Were you looking for her? Yeah, it was past supper time, and she hadn't met the rest of us on the veranda as usual, so we could eat together. It wasn't like her to just not show up, and it worried me. I kept thinking about how afraid she'd seemed earlier that day, and for at least a couple of days, about how she tried to tell me what scared her. What had she said? Nothing that made any sense to me. She said that she heard things, especially at night, and that there is something else inside her sometimes. Something else? That's the way she put it, something else. There was something inside her sometimes, and it made a sound like her own heartbeat. Diana frowned slightly. Does that make sense to you now? Have you ever heard in your mind something that sounded like your own heart beating, Diana? Instead of answering that directly, she said, You think Missy might have been psychic, a medium? Have you? She shook her head. No. I've heard a lot of things inside my own mind, but never anything that sounded like a heartbeat. At least not that I remember. It was Quentin's turn to frown. Still, that doesn't mean she wasn't psychic. It would explain why she was hearing things that frightened her. Diana hesitated, then said, Somebody killed her, Quentin, somebody real. It's pretty obvious she had good reason to be afraid. You don't have to remind me of that. What I mean is, if you've been looking for a paranormal explanation all this time, that's why I was never able to solve her murder? He shook his head. I'm a cop, Diana. Psychic or not, the first thing we're taught to look for is the reasonable, rational, likely explanation, because more often than not, that's what we're going to find. It wasn't there in this case? The cops who investigated the case 25 years ago never even had a decent suspect. I've gone over all the reports on their investigation and conducted my own investigation for years, however unofficially. Even interviewed dozens of people who were here or in the area at the time, and I have nothing new to show for it. He drew a breath and let it out slowly. Missy was strangled with a piece of twine from a bale of hay that had come from a field just yards away from where her body was found. A field filled with freshly baled hay. All that tells me as a cop, all it would tell any cop, is that the murder weapon was near to hand and convenient, which most likely means the murder itself was impulsive or opportunistic rather than planned. Something triggered his rage or his need, and he used the first weapon he could reach to kill her. He? Odds are the killer is male. Women virtually never kill children unrelated to them, and Missy's only relation here, her mother, was helping in the kitchen for hours that day, reportedly under observation by a dozen other people the whole time. Beyond that, nothing at the scene offered any indication of who killed Missy, or why. Diana frowned, and, not even sure where the question came from, asked, Why did he even need the twine? I mean, she was just a little girl. Wouldn't it have made more sense if he had used his hands? Quentin nodded slightly. An educated guess is that she was probably strangled from behind with that twine, because he didn't want her to see him, or else didn't want to look into her face as she died. Why? Maybe because watching her die would have meant he'd have to admit to himself that he was a killer. How could he delude himself that he wasn't? Easily. People do it all the time, you know that. Delude ourselves. Mostly in minor things. We delude ourselves into believing that we won't be one of the ones let go when our company starts layoffs, that our favorite sports team has a shot at a championship, that we really can afford that shiny new car calling out to us from the lot. All of which is a long way from denying you're a killer when you're choking the life out of someone, Diana pointed out. Yeah, it's a leap, but I believe by the time he picked up that twine and wrapped it around her neck, this killer had gradually reached that point. It may have taken him years to get there, but he had, possibly for the first time. By then, by that day, he could kill, but didn't view himself as a killer. Quentin had seemingly been cool and clinical up to that point, but the detachment left when he continued, his voice going quite quiet and a little rough. Whatever happened out there, whatever triggered it, he killed Missy. She was left in that stream, her body wedged in among the rocks, the twine still wrapped around her neck. He paused and added softly, her eyes were open. When I first saw her, she seemed to be looking right at me, pleading with me, as if I could help her, as if I should have. Quentin. By then, she'd become the little sister I'd never had, someone I couldn't imagine my life without, and I stood there, frozen, staring into her eyes, knowing that I had failed her, as a brother, as a friend. I hadn't listened to her, I hadn't protected her, I hadn't helped her, I hadn't saved her. It felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. Everything around me faded, grew dark, until all I could see was her. Her eyes, that pale, pale face, and the twine wrapped around her neck, cutting into her skin. Such a strangely small, ordinary thing to have snuffed out a life, to have stopped to smile and silenced a laugh forever. Just twine from a bale of hay. Diana wasn't entirely sure she wanted to hear any of this, yet at the same time she couldn't remember ever feeling so focused, so clear-minded. There were no scattered thoughts, no random flashes of information, no whispers in her head. There wasn't even the earlier shock and fear at the certain knowledge that she had on this day spoken casually with a ghost. There was only this man and his low, hurting voice, painting for her a horrific, tragic image she could see so clearly. It was as though she had stood there herself and seen that murdered little girl. Her long, dark hair moving in the water as though it and she were still alive, big, dark eyes, open, staring up. It wasn't a sexual crime, Quentin continued, obviously with difficulty. At least that was the official conclusion, and I haven't found any evidence to believe otherwise. She was fully dressed, and no bodily fluids were found on or near her, though being submerged in water means we can't be certain there wasn't something on her clothing or body that was washed away. There were no bruises, no signs of trauma other than what had killed her, no defensive injuries. They scraped under her fingernails, took clippings, but there was nothing, no evidence to help identify her killer. She probably died there in the stream or nearby. There was nothing to indicate it might have happened somewhere else. Nothing to indicate that she fought her attacker, or even that she struggled at all. The last person to see her alive, as far as they could determine, was me. That surprised Diana. You? Yeah. Late that afternoon, I was coming back from the stables and met her near what's now the entrance to the Zen garden. That's when she tried one more time to tell me that she was afraid, that there was something wrong here, but I was hot and tired and just wanted to go to her cottage and take a shower. I thought she'd had a nightmare, or maybe was just making up a story for whatever reason. Could there have been a reason? He shrugged, because the other kids and I had been spending more time riding the horses, and she never went along since she was afraid of them, because the summer was winding down and we were all getting a little bored, a little tired of one another's company, whatever, so I brushed her off. He paused and added steadily, they fixed the time of death as just under 2 hours later, and nobody saw her in all that time. Nobody admitted to it. In all fairness, they probably wouldn't have noticed her. She had the knack of slipping past people without really being seen. Like a ghost. Like a ghost. In the privacy of her office, Stephanie Boyd grimaced as she held the phone to her ear. She was pretty good at keeping her thoughts and feelings to herself, but it was a relief now to relax physically, as she couldn't allow herself to verbally, with this man at any rate. Her boss had, not surprisingly, reacted badly to the news of the remains of a child being found on the grounds of the lodge. His reaction was even worse once he grasped the probable ramifications of the police investigation already underway. You couldn't stop them, Stephanie? How? She asked, repressing the urge towards sarcasm. The police are bound by law to investigate something like this, and I have no authority to stop them. Offhand, I can't imagine any local judge or politician trying it either, not when it concerns the death of a child. She drew a breath, setting aside, of course, the fact that it could only further damage the reputation of the lodge. If we seemed in any way reluctant to find the truth of this tragedy, we are morally compelled to do whatever we can. Of course, oh, of course. Doug Walsh tried hard to sound as if he cared about the long-ago murder of a little boy, and he almost pulled it off. Almost. Stephanie kept her own tone brisk and businesslike. Under the circumstances, I believe our best course is to cooperate fully with the authorities. The police captain in charge of the investigation has assured me that he will do his utmost to conduct all relevant inquiries as discreetly as possible. She decided not to mention the FBI agent who was, after all, here very much unofficially. Wallace sighed. Yeah, I've heard that before. Pressing, Stephanie said, and I have your permission to extend our cooperation to the police, to make our records available to them? Christ, is that really necessary? Unconsciously, Stephanie tilted her head to one side. Is there any reason why it would be a problem, Mr. Wallace? He was silent for a beat or two, then said, Stephanie, you're aware that most, if not all, our clients, our guests, value their privacy. Yes, sir. She stopped it there, waiting. In her experience, silence quite often produced answers where insistent questions wouldn't. We have had some very important clients. Yes, sir. He sighed again, impatient. One of the services we offer is discretion, Stephanie. The very reputation of the lodge was founded on that. Our specialty, as it were, the lure to get people to such an isolated spot. So if a very important client checks in with a companion, not his wife, we respect his privacy. If an actress recovering from cosmetic surgery or the unfortunate repercussions of an ill-judged affair wishes her presence to remain, well, secret, we oblige. If a group of business people requires a secure and discreet setting in which to discuss the future of their company, we provide that. Yes, sir. Damn it, Stephanie, we mind our own business, and our paperwork reflects that. Evenly, she said, sir, I very much doubt that the records of any of the situations you described could possibly be relevant to this police investigation, and would therefore be of no interest to them. Wallace swore not under his breath. Stephanie, what I'm trying to tell you is that there have been occasions in the past during which no records were kept, officially or unofficially. Sir, I was never told that anything of that nature would be part of my duties, she said stiffly. No, of course not. We don't do that sort of thing these days, Wallace was quick to say. We keep a private ledger, which I'm sure you were told about, since I told you myself, for those more discreet occasions, but there were regrettable instances in the past in which lodge employees accepted additional gratuities to keep a guest's name or the situation entirely off the books. Somewhat grimly, Stephanie wondered what she'd gotten herself into. It had seemed like such a nice little job. I see, sir. Wallace's tone was strained but steady. I don't know how thoroughly these police officers mean to examine our books and other records, or what they expect to find, but someone familiar with hotel accounting would certainly notice some discrepancies. Stephanie knew. Such as food and beverages charged to supposedly unoccupied rooms, such as spa services booked and not charged. Yes, exactly those sorts of things. Wallace drew a breath. I can assure you that all monies were reported and accounted in accordance with the law. We merely protected the anonymity of our clients. And Stephanie believed in the Easter Bunny. She wondered how many secrets this place really held, and which of them would blow up in her face the instant they were exposed. Yes, sir. There really wasn't much else she could say, at least as long as she kept this job. He cleared his throat. My point being, of course, that if the police should look closely at our books, they could conceivably find things that could send them off on quite useless and needless tangents in their investigation of this child's tragic death. Baldly, she demanded, what do you expect me to do, sir? You're on the scene, Wallace said, his tone persuasive. You can guide the local police. Keep them focused on details relevant to their investigation. Guide them, sir? Don't be deliberately dense, Stephanie. You can make certain that the police aren't allowed to paw indiscriminately through our accounts and records. Boundaries must be set. I've already been asked to allow access to employment records and historical documents stored in the basement. I don't see how those could be relevant. I've been assured it's a simple procedure. The police need to know who was here at the time the child was murdered, and since 10 years have passed, they'll need whatever paperwork they can find. You need to see those records first, Stephanie. Sir, are you asking me to interfere with that investigation? Absolutely not. He sounded offended now. though also harassed. I'm not suggesting you keep anything of value from the police, merely that you take a look before they do, weed out what your common sense tells you cannot possibly be relevant, and notify me should you find anything unusual. Unusual, sir? Just anything that might strike you as odd, that's all. Nothing to do with this murder, obviously. Stephanie had pretty good instincts, and right now they were practically doing handstands to get her attention. Trying to guide the police away from discrepancies in the bookkeeping was one thing. Actively searching through documents herself in order to report back to Wallace was something else entirely, and suspicious as hell. What did he expect her to find? Stephanie, I'm making a perfectly reasonable request that you keep in mind the best interests of your employers, that's all. Stephanie was tempted, but decided not to try and pin him down to more fully explain his meaning. He was adept at sidestepping, for one thing. For another, she really didn't want him worried enough about what she might do to hop on a plane out in California and come here himself. Not before she figured out what this was all about anyway. If there was anything Army brats learned young, it was that the more information you had in hand, the better your likelihood of making the best decision possible. Nobody could sneak up on you if you knew where they stood. In other words, protect your damn flank and your ass while you were at it. Keeping her own tone calm, but just faintly impatient, she said, "Very well, sir. I'll take a look downstairs and report to you anything that seems to me unusual, and I'll work as closely as possible with the police to keep fully abreast of the investigation." Good. Wallace sounded a bit wary rather than satisfied, as if he realized that Stephanie had not quite sung the team fight song. Good. I'll expect regular updates, Stephanie, no matter how this plays out. Yes, sir. She crossed her fingers. With the weekend looming, I doubt much will get done until Monday at least. I'll call then with an update. Very well. She cradled the receiver, then leaned back in her chair, propped her feet on the desk, and thought about this. Item. There were discrepancies in the lodge's accounts and possibly other paperwork as well. Item. Douglas Wallace, properties manager for the very wealthy group of investors who own the lodge, was worried about the wrong person finding the wrong thing while sifting through that paperwork. Item. Whatever Wallace was worried about might or might not have something to do with the murder of an 8-year-old boy 10 years ago, but either way, Wallace was just the sight of scared and not hiding it well, which meant bad news any way you cut it. Final item. Stephanie Boyd was sitting in the hot seat. Shit, she muttered. I knew this job was too good to be true. You can't blame yourself, Diana said. Rationally, I know that. Quentin shrugged. I've told myself to let it go and move on with my life. Goodness knows other people have told me the same thing. But whether psychic abilities, a guilty conscience, or simple instincts, something inside me has insisted all these years that I had to find Missy's killer and let her rest in peace. It's something I have to do, something I'm meant to do. Recalling the thin face and sad eyes she had seen and drawn, Diana said slowly, I wish I could tell you she was already at peace, but you can't. You saw her, which means she's still in, for want of a better term, limbo. Even after all these years, she hasn't been able to move on. On to where? He smiled slightly. Do you want me to say heaven? I don't know. Would it be true? Not a question I can answer. Whatever I know of the future tells me nothing of the spirit realm, or anything beyond this life, so far anyway. Diana frowned. She sipped her cooling tea, and then said, My sketch of Missy, I drew that before I saw her. Quentin knew what she was asking. It's a form of automatic writing. Your subconscious and psychic abilities were on autopilot, more or less. Why? We have a few theories. Automatic writing or drawing is almost always triggered by stress. I know of only a couple of psychics who are able to deliberately tap into the ability. For the rest of you, it tends to manifest itself because something is being suppressed. She stared at him. Your abilities have been trying to surface for most of your life. Trying to. Between the meds and therapies and denial, they've been pushed down, again and again, beaten back, imprisoned. But something that powerful finds a way, sooner or later, to escape whatever's restraining it. You said something about blackouts earlier. Diana frowned uneasily. I did? Yeah, I'm guessing the blackouts began sometime during your early teen years. during the physical and emotional chaos of adolescence, and that either they've grown stronger with time or else tend to occur when you're under unusual levels of stress. Grudgingly, she said the latter. Quentin didn't let her see how relieved he was by that information. If the blackouts were erratic and stress-related, it was less likely that Diana's abilities were becoming a danger to her. Less likely, not impossible. Which means, Diana prompted, which means, or probably means, that you black out only when your abilities can find no other way of breaking free. She set her cup down on the coffee table and leaned back, crossing her arms over her breasts. Okay, now you're really creeping me out. You make these so-called abilities of mine sound as if they have a mind of their own. Energy, Diana. Your brain is naturally designed to tap into energy, and it has to be able to release it. Think of steam building up inside a pot holding boiling water. If the lid's on tight, the pressure can intensify until it's a destructive force, until the container itself is endangered. Some of the steam has to be allowed to escape. Okay, but the energy you tap into has to have an outlet, something your instincts have always known. If you can't provide that release valve consciously, by allowing yourself to undergo the sort of visions you experienced earlier today, then your subconscious will find a way to do it for your own safety, the blackouts. I don't remember what happens then, she hesitated, then added, but I've awakened in strange places, doing strange things sometimes. I'm not surprised. Psychic blackouts are an extreme response, which means the energy level just before they occur has to be tremendous. And then what happens once a blackout is triggered? Diana wasn't sure which was strongest in her, curiosity or fear. Quentin shook his head. I have no way of knowing, not for certain. Psychic abilities are as unique as the individuals who possess them. The unconscious release of stored energy could take just about any form. What sort of strange things have you awakened in the middle of? I was in a lake once, up to my waist. She shivered. I couldn't swim at the time. Now I can. He frowned. What else? Driving my father's Jag, very fast. I was 14. Jesus. Yeah, scared the hell out of me. When you came out of the blackout, you didn't have any sense of where you were going or why? No, just... It was Diana's turn to frown. Just a pull. Pull? Yeah, as if something or someone, I suppose, had been calling me, drawing me toward them. Where were you headed? I was so shaken up by it, I hardly noticed where I was. Think, try to remember. It's important? Maybe. Concentrating, Diana tried to push past the remembered terror and panic and recall more than emotions. What had she done? Slowed the car, looking for a sign, her hands cold and sweaty on the steering wheel and her heart pounding. In the darkness before dawn, everything had looked alien, and she felt so alone there weren't even words for it. I was on an interstate highway, she remembered as the sign flashed through her memories. Heading south. Took me more than an hour to find a phone to call my father. He was not happy. As scared as I was, so it seemed to me. She paused and added, there was a new clinic the next week, a new doctor, a new treatment. I'm sorry, Diana. She looked at him. That was one time I was more than willing to try whatever treatment the doctors offered. I was 14 years old, Quentin, and I woke up on an interstate highway at 5 o'clock in the morning, driving my father's Jaguar at nearly 80 miles an hour. I was afraid I'd been trying to kill myself. I think my father was afraid of the same thing. And the doctors? Did they believe I was suicidal? Her shoulders lifted and fell. Over the years, some did, I'm sure, but I never did any of the things suicidal patients were supposed to do. Never tried to slit my wrists or hurt myself in any other way. If you discount the blackout experiences, of course. I never tried to hoard medications, never talked about killing myself, never drew pictures to indicate suicide was on or under my mind. What about the blackouts? Frequent? There haven't been that many, really. Maybe 2 a year, and mostly I come out of them in my bed or just sitting in a chair, like I've been asleep, dreaming dreams I can never remember. The subconscious tends to be a good guardian and protects us from what we can't or don't need to endure, Quentin said. I wouldn't be surprised if realizing you're psychic now doesn't open a few doors for you, though. You may begin to remember those dreams and those experiences. That was a scary possibility, Diana thought. Maybe even more scary than not remembering anything. She said one of my doctors became convinced that the blackouts were caused by an adverse reaction to one or more of the drugs prescribed for me. That was almost a year ago. He took you off everything? She nodded. The first couple of months were hell. It was a supervised withdrawal, so I had to be hospitalized, watched. So many of the medications had been prescribed to quiet my mind and keep me calm. Sedatives, Quentin said, anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants. Yeah, when all those were taken away from me, even gradually, it was like I went into hyperdrive. I lost 20 pounds because I couldn't be still. I talked so fast no one could understand what I was saying. I couldn't sleep and nothing could hold my attention more than a few minutes at a time. My father wanted them to put me back on the meds because of the state I was in, but the doctor, bless him, held firm. And after the first weeks, my mind was finally clear enough so I could be firm too. After a moment, Quentin asked, how long had it been since you'd been completely off medications? Diana didn't really want to tell him, but finally said the first medications were prescribed when I was 11. From that point on, there was always something, usually more than one drug at a time, but always something. I'm 33 now. You do the math. More than 20 years. You've spent 2/3 of your life drugged. Just about into oblivion, she agreed.